Ethan Parker stood at the edge of the field, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jeans. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the golden wheat, and the air smelled of earth and drying grass. It was a peaceful day, the kind that made you forget about troubles. But peace never lasted long in Ethan's life. Behind him, the old farmhouse creaked as the wind pushed against its weathered walls. Inside, his younger sister Lily sat on the floor, playing with a set of plastic blocks she had found in the attic. At just 5 years old, Lily was small for her age, with curly brown hair and big green eyes that always seemed to sparkle with mischief. She hummed softly to herself, oblivious to the world outside. Ethan glanced up at the sky. Something felt off. The birds were unusually quiet, and the breeze carried an odd chill despite the warm season. He squinted, noticing a faint glow on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be lightning, but the light didn't flicker or fade. Instead, it grew brighter, spreading across the heavens like spilled ink. His stomach tightened. "Lily," Ethan called, turning back toward the house. "Come here." The little girl dropped her blocks and ran to the door, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. "What is it?" she asked, her voice high-pitched with curiosity. "Stay close," Ethan said, pulling her behind him as he stepped onto the porch. The glowing light now dominated the sky, pulsing rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Ethan staggered, grabbing the railing for support. Lily clung to his leg, her tiny fingers digging into his jeans. Suddenly, shapes emerged from the light. Enormous ships descended slowly, their metallic surfaces gleaming ominously. They hovered above the fields, blotting out the sun. Ethan shielded his eyes, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Were they planes? Satellites? No, these things were alive, alien. A booming voice echoed through the air, cold and mechanical. "Humans of Earth, we are the Xarthan Empire. Your planet will serve our needs. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked down at Lily, who stared wide-eyed at the ships. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she let out a soft hum, mimicking the sound the ships had made moments earlier. To Ethan's astonishment, one of the smaller vessels shuddered violently before jerking sideways. Sparks flew from its surface, and it began to drift away erratically. What did you do?" Ethan whispered, staring at his sister. Lily blinked, looking confused. "I don't know," she said quietly. "It just happened." Before Ethan could respond, a group of figures appeared near the edge of the field. They wore sleek armor that shimmered like liquid metal, and their elongated heads glowed faintly. One of them raised a hand, pointing directly at Lily. Ethan instinctively scooped her up and bolted toward the barn. Inside, he shoved open the trapdoor to the storm cellar and helped Lily climb down the ladder. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice firm despite the fear clawing at his throat. "No matter what happens, don't come out unless I say so." "But Ethan," Lily started to protest. "No buts," he interrupted, closing the hatch firmly above her head. Above ground, the aliens spread out, scanning the area with strange devices. Ethan pressed himself against the wall of the barn, holding his breath. Whatever those creatures wanted, he knew it wasn't good. And if they were after Lily, he would do everything in his power to protect her, even if it meant risking his own life. Ethan crouched low behind a stack of hay bales, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The aliens moved methodically across the field, their glowing heads scanning every inch of the farm. Their weapons, long, sleek devices that hummed with energy, were pointed forward, ready to strike. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do next. He couldn't fight them. They were too advanced, too powerful. All he could do was keep Lily safe. Inside the storm cellar, Lily sat huddled on the dirt floor, clutching her knees to her chest. She didn't cry, but her small hands trembled as she listened to the muffled sounds of footsteps above. Every now and then, a sharp buzz would echo through the ground, making her flinch. She wanted to call out to Ethan to ask if he was okay, but she remembered his words. "Stay here. Don't come out unless I say so." Back outside, two of the aliens approached the barn. They paused at the entrance, their glowing heads tilting slightly as if listening for something. One of them raised its weapon, and a beam of blue light shot out, slicing through the wooden door like it was paper. Ethan ducked just in time, his heart hammering in his chest. He scrambled backward, grabbing a pitchfork leaning against the wall. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all he had. The aliens stepped inside, their movements smooth and deliberate. Ethan held his ground, gripping the pitchfork tightly. If they came closer, he'd try to fight them off, even if it meant getting hurt. But before he could act, one of the aliens suddenly stopped. Its head tilted again, and it let out a strange mechanical whine. Then, without warning, its armor began to crackle and spark. Ethan stared in disbelief as the alien stumbled back, clutching its helmet. The other alien turned toward its companion, confusion evident in its jerky movements. That's when Ethan heard it, a faint, high-pitched hum coming from below. It was Lily. Somehow, she was doing this. "Lily." Ethan whispered urgently, glancing toward the trapdoor. "Stop. Please, stop." The humming ceased almost instantly, and the alien's armor stopped sparking. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, with an angry hiss, the two aliens retreated, moving quickly back toward their ships. Ethan exhaled sharply, lowering the pitchfork. His arms felt weak, and his legs threatened to give out beneath him. What had just happened? How had Lily done that? He hurried to the trapdoor and opened it, peering down into the dimly lit cellar. Lily looked up at him, her green eyes wide and filled with questions. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. "No," Ethan replied, climbing down the ladder. "You did something amazing. But we need to be careful. Those things, they're after you." Lily frowned, clearly confused. "Why?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but we have to find answers. And fast." As night fell, Ethan decided they couldn't stay on the farm any longer. The aliens might return, and next time, they wouldn't leave so easily. He packed a bag with food, water, and some clothes, then helped Lily climb out of the cellar. Together, they slipped out of the barn and into the darkness. They walked for hours, sticking to back roads and avoiding towns. Ethan kept a close eye on Lily, watching for any sign of exhaustion. She was resilient, though, her little legs carrying her farther than he expected. Still, he knew they couldn't keep going like this forever. They needed help from someone who might understand what was happening to Lily. By dawn, they reached the edge of a small town. Ethan spotted a modest house tucked away from the main road, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. An old woman stood on the porch, watering plants. Something about her seemed trustworthy, so Ethan approached cautiously. "Excuse me," he said, stepping into view. "We need your help." The woman turned, her gray hair catching the morning light. Her sharp eyes studied Ethan and Lily carefully before softening. "What's wrong?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain. Finally, he said, "It's my sister. She can do things. Things I don't understand. And there are people, or creatures, after her." The woman set down her watering can and nodded slowly. "Come inside," she said. "My name is Rachel. Let's talk." Rachel led Ethan and Lily into her cozy living room, where shelves lined with books covered nearly every wall. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of lavender from a candle burning on the side table. She gestured for them to sit on the couch while she pulled up a chair across from them. Her sharp eyes studied Lily closely, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "Start from the beginning," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm. "Tell me everything." Ethan took a deep breath and began explaining what had happened at the farm. The strange ships descending from the sky, the aliens' arrival, and how Lily's humming had caused one of their suits to malfunction. As he spoke, Rachel listened intently, occasionally nodding or leaning forward to ask a question. When he finished, she turned her attention to Lily. "And you don't know why this happens?" Rachel asked gently, addressing the little girl directly. Lily shook her head, her curly hair bouncing slightly. "I just feel it," she said quietly, "like something inside me wants to come out." Rachel frowned thoughtfully. She stood and disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a small device that looked like a handheld scanner. "This is an old piece of equipment I used years ago when I worked as an astrophysicist," she explained. "It measures electromagnetic activity. Let's see if we can learn more about what's going on." She knelt in front of Lily and waved the scanner over her head. At first, nothing unusual appeared, but then, as Lily hummed softly under her breath, the device's screen lit up with frantic beeping. Numbers and graphs spiked wildly, far beyond anything normal for a human being. Rachel's eyes widened. "Incredible," she murmured. "Your brain is emitting electromagnetic waves at frequencies so high they're almost impossible to measure. These waves disrupt any nearby technology. That's why the alien's armor malfunctioned." Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "So she's not doing it on purpose. It's just part of her." "It seems that way," Rachel replied, setting the scanner aside. "But there's something else. Waves like these shouldn't exist naturally. They're too precise, too powerful. It's almost as though she was designed this way." "Designed," Ethan repeated, his voice rising slightly. "You mean like someone made her?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "I don't know for sure, but whatever the reason, the aliens clearly recognize her potential. That's why they're after her." Lily hugged her knees to her chest, looking scared. "Am I bad?" she whispered. "No," Ethan said quickly, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "You're not bad. You're special, and we're going to figure this out together." Rachel nodded in agreement. "We need to keep moving. If the aliens are tracking her energy signature, they'll find us eventually. There's a resistance group hiding in the mountains. They might have the resources to help us understand what's happening to Lily." Ethan glanced at Lily, who still looked uncertain. He hated the idea of dragging her into danger, but staying put wasn't an option either. "Where do we go?" he asked Rachel. "There's an old gas station about 20 miles east of here," Rachel replied. "It's abandoned, but it has supplies and shelter. We can regroup there and plan our next move." As they prepared to leave, Rachel packed some food and tools into a bag while Ethan kept watch outside. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the quiet town. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a world where none of this had happened. A world where Lily could grow up without fear, without running. But reality snapped him back to the present. Whatever secrets lay ahead, one thing was clear. Lily's power was extraordinary, and protecting her would require sacrifices neither of them could yet comprehend. The journey to the abandoned gas station was long and tense. Ethan carried Lily on his back for most of the way, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. Rachel followed close behind, clutching a flashlight and glancing over her shoulder every few minutes. The road stretched endlessly before them, lined with trees that seemed to loom closer in the dark. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made Ethan's heart race. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. By the time they reached the gas station, the moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the cracked pavement. The building itself was old and rundown, its windows boarded up, and its sign faded. Weeds grew through the cracks in the asphalt, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline and damp earth. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "Let's check inside," Rachel said, pulling out a small crowbar from her bag. She pried open the door with practiced ease, revealing a dusty interior filled with broken shelves and empty cans. A single chair sat overturned in the corner, and cobwebs clung to the ceiling like ghostly veils. Ethan set Lily down and handed her a granola bar from their supplies. "Stay here while we look around," he told her gently. "We'll make sure it's safe." While Rachel explored the back rooms, Ethan inspected the main area. The floor creaked beneath his boots as he moved, and he kept one hand on the pocket knife tucked into his belt. Everything seemed quiet, too quiet, but he didn't trust it, not after what had happened at the farm. Just as he was about to call Rachel back, a noise outside caught his attention. It was soft at first, almost like footsteps crunching against gravel. Then came the unmistakable hum of machinery, a sound that sent chills down his spine. The aliens had found them. "Rachel," Ethan hissed, rushing toward the back room. "They're here." Rachel emerged quickly, her face grim. "We need to hide. Now." Together, they ushered Lily into a storage closet hidden behind a stack of crates. The space was cramped, but it would shield them from view, for a little while, at least. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for silence, then closed the door just as the front entrance burst open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the gas station, accompanied by the eerie glow of alien armor. 2 Xarthan soldiers entered, their elongated heads scanning the room methodically. One of them held a device that emitted a soft beeping noise, likely tracking Lily's energy signature. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. If they found the closet, there'd be no escape. Inside the closet, Lily trembled, her wide eyes locked on Ethan. She opened her mouth to speak, but he shook his head firmly. Instead, she began humming softly under her breath, her voice barely audible even in the confined space. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the closet. Outside, the aliens froze. Their armor started to crackle and spark, just like before. One of them let out a mechanical hiss, stumbling backward as its helmet malfunctioned. The other tried to retreat, but the humming intensified, causing both of them to stagger out of the building in disarray. When the coast was clear, Ethan pushed the door open cautiously. "Lily," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "You did it again." But Lily looked exhausted, her face pale, and her breathing shallow. "It hurts," she murmured, clutching her head. Rachel knelt beside her, concern etched across her face. "She's using too much energy," she said. "If she keeps doing this, it could harm her." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to tell her to stop, to protect her from pushing herself too far. But how could he when her power was the only thing keeping them alive? "We need to keep moving," Rachel said finally. "They'll regroup and come back stronger next time. We can't stay here." Ethan nodded, lifting Lily into his arms once more. As they stepped back into the night, the weight of their situation settled heavily on his shoulders. They were running out of places to hide, and time was running out for Lily. The group trudged along a narrow dirt path, the forest closing in around them like a shadowy wall. Ethan carried Lily on his back again, her small frame growing heavier with each step. Her head rested against his shoulder, and she had fallen into an uneasy sleep, her breathing shallow and uneven. Rachel walked ahead, scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. They hadn't gone far when they heard it, the low hum of engines. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer. Ethan's stomach tightened as he realized what it meant. The aliens weren't giving up. They were tracking them relentlessly, their advanced technology making escape nearly impossible. "Over there," Rachel whispered suddenly, pointing to a crumbling structure partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It looked like an old gas station garage, its roof sagging, and its walls covered in ivy. "We can hide inside." Ethan didn't hesitate. He followed Rachel into the building, ducking under the broken doorframe. The interior was dark and musty, filled with rusted tools and piles of debris. Rachel quickly cleared a space behind a stack of old tires, motioning for Ethan to lay Lily down. She handed him a blanket from her bag to cover her. "We need to stay quiet," Rachel murmured, crouching near the entrance. "If they find us." Her words were cut off by the sound of footsteps outside. Heavy boots crunched against gravel, accompanied by the mechanical whine of alien armor. Ethan held his breath, clutching the pocket knife in his hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Not robotic or alien, but human. "Hello? Is anyone here?" Rachel froze, then slowly stood up. "Who's there?" she called out cautiously. A figure stepped into view, holding a lantern. It was a woman, her face streaked with dirt and her clothes patched and worn. She had short brown hair tied back in a messy ponytail and carried a wrench in one hand. Her sharp blue eyes scanned the room suspiciously before landing on Rachel. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," the woman said, lowering the lantern slightly. "I live around here. What are you doing in my garage?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "We're travelers. We're trying to stay out of sight." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "From who? Or should I say what?" Before Rachel could respond, the hum of alien drones filled the air. Sarah cursed under her breath and darted toward the entrance, peering outside. "Looks like we've got company." Ethan stepped forward, still holding Lily protectively. "They're after my sister," he explained quickly. "She has some kind of power that messes with their tech. But if they catch her—" Sarah glanced at Lily, her expression softening slightly. Then she nodded firmly. "All right. You're not going anywhere tonight. Follow me." She led them deeper into the garage, revealing a hidden trapdoor beneath a pile of rags. "This leads to an underground bunker," she explained. "It's not much, but it'll keep you safe, for now." As they climbed down the ladder, Ethan noticed how organized the space was. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with canned food, water bottles, and medical supplies. A generator hummed softly in the corner, powering a single overhead light. "This is incredible," Rachel said, looking around in awe. "How did you build all this?" Sarah shrugged. "You learn to prepare when you've been living off-grid as long as I have. Now tell me everything, and don't leave anything out." Ethan hesitated, but eventually began explaining their situation. As he spoke, Sarah listened carefully, occasionally nodding or asking questions. When he finished, she let out a low whistle. "So your sister's some kind of walking EMP machine, huh? That's impressive." "She doesn't mean to do it," Ethan added quickly. "And it's hurting her. We don't know how much longer she can keep this up." Sarah frowned thoughtfully. "Well, sitting ducks won't help anyone. If those aliens are after her, we need to fight back. And I might know where to start." Ethan exchanged a glance with Rachel, unsure whether to trust this stranger. But as the distant hum of alien machinery grew louder, he realized they didn't have many options left. The next morning, Sarah led the group to a hidden corner of the bunker where she kept old maps and blueprints spread out on a makeshift table. The papers were worn and faded, but Ethan could still make out the outlines of roads, towns, and mountains. Sarah pointed to a spot deep in the Rocky Mountains. "This is where you need to go," she said firmly. "There's an underground resistance base there. They've been fighting the Xarthans for months now. If anyone can help you figure out what's going on with Lily and keep her safe, it's them." Ethan frowned, studying the map. "How far is it?" he asked. "About 3 days' walk if we move quickly," Sarah replied. "But it won't be easy. The aliens have drones patrolling the area, and their ships are always scanning from above." Rachel crossed her arms, looking skeptical. "And how do you know about this place? Have you been there?" Sarah shook her head. "No, but I've heard rumors from other survivors. It's our best shot. Besides, staying here isn't an option. You saw what happened at the gas station last night. Those aliens are getting smarter." Ethan glanced at Lily, who was sitting quietly on a cot nearby, hugging her knees. She looked pale and tired, dark circles under her eyes, making her seem even smaller than she was. He hated the idea of dragging her across miles of dangerous terrain, but Sarah was right. They couldn't stay hidden forever. "We'll leave tonight," Ethan decided finally, under cover of darkness. Preparations began immediately. Sarah gathered supplies, extra food, water bottles, blankets, and even a first aid kit she'd scavenged over the years. Rachel helped by packing tools and spare parts that might come in handy. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to get Lily to eat something, though she barely touched the crackers he offered her. As dusk fell, they set out, sticking to dense forests and avoiding open areas as much as possible. The air was cool, and the only sounds came from crickets chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. For a while, everything seemed peaceful. But peace didn't last long. Around midnight, the hum of alien drones shattered the quiet. Bright lights swept through the trees, illuminating the ground below. Ethan grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her behind a large tree, motioning for the others to take cover. His heart pounded as the drones hovered overhead, their sensors scanning the area. "They're tracking her again," Rachel whispered urgently. "Her energy signature must be stronger now." Lily whimpered softly, clutching Ethan's arm. "I don't want to hurt anymore," she murmured. Ethan squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You won't have to. We'll protect you." Suddenly, one of the drones jerked violently, sparks flying from its body. It plummeted to the ground with a crash, sending dirt and debris flying everywhere. The remaining drones paused mid-air, confused by the sudden malfunction. Sarah stepped forward, holding up a modified device she'd built earlier, a crude jammer designed to disrupt alien technology. "That should buy us some time," she said with a smirk. "Let's move." They ran through the forest, dodging fallen branches and leaping over roots. Behind them, the sound of more drones joined the chase, their mechanical whines growing louder. Ethan kept Lily close, shielding her with his body whenever a burst of light flashed too near. By dawn, they reached a rocky ridge overlooking a wide valley. In the distance, nestled between towering peaks, lay the entrance to the resistance base, a narrow tunnel carved into the mountainside. Exhausted but relieved, Ethan turned to Sarah. "You've done enough," he told her. "Thank you." Sarah shrugged, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Just make sure you take care of her," she said, nodding toward Lily. "She's special. Don't let anyone forget that." With that, Sarah disappeared back into the woods, leaving Ethan, Rachel, and Lily to continue alone. As they approached the tunnel, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in days, they weren't running blindly. Whatever waited inside, they would face it together. The tunnel leading into the mountain was dark and damp, its walls slick with moisture. Ethan held Lily's hand tightly as they stepped inside, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly against the stone. Rachel walked ahead, using her flashlight to guide the way. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and a faint metallic smell lingered, making Ethan's nose itch. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a large underground chamber. The space was alive with activity. People moved quickly between rows of tables stacked with supplies, while others worked on strange-looking machines or studied maps pinned to the walls. A man stood near the center of the room, his broad shoulders and weathered face marking him as someone used to taking charge. He wore a patched-up jacket and carried a rifle slung over one shoulder. "Who are you?" the man demanded, stepping forward. His voice was rough but steady, carrying the weight of authority. Rachel stepped in front of Ethan and Lily, holding up her hands to show they meant no harm. "We're looking for help," she said calmly. "This is Lily. She has abilities that might interest you." The man's sharp eyes flicked to Lily, narrowing slightly. Abilities. Before anyone could explain, one of the nearby machines, a sleek device covered in blinking lights, suddenly sparked and shut down. Everyone turned to look at Lily, who had started humming softly under her breath. Her green eyes widened as she realized what was happening, and she stopped abruptly, looking guilty. The man let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." He extended a hand toward Ethan. "Name's Jack Dawson. I lead this outfit." Ethan shook his hand hesitantly. "Ethan Parker. This is my sister, Lily." Jack nodded, then gestured for them to follow him. "Come on. We need to talk." He led them to a smaller room off to the side, where a round table was surrounded by mismatched chairs. Once everyone was seated, Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Start from the beginning," he said, "and don't leave anything out." Ethan took a deep breath and explained everything: the alien invasion, Lily's powers, and their desperate journey to find safety. As he spoke, Jack listened intently, occasionally glancing at Lily. When Ethan finished, Jack sat back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "So she can disable alien tech just by humming?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not just humming," Rachel interjected. "Her brain emits electromagnetic waves strong enough to disrupt any advanced technology within range. But it's taking a toll on her body. She can't keep doing it indefinitely." Jack nodded slowly. "That kind of power could turn the tide in this war, if we harness it." "No," Ethan interrupted sharply, his voice firm. "We're not using her like some weapon. She's a child." Jack held up his hands defensively. "Easy, kid. I'm not saying we throw her into battle, but we can't ignore what she can do either. Those aliens won't stop until they have her, or she's dead. Either way, we need a plan." Rachel chimed in, her tone measured. "What if we use her abilities strategically? Teach her how to control them so she doesn't hurt herself. In the meantime, we focus on defending ourselves and hitting the Xarthans where it hurts." Ethan clenched his fists, torn between protecting Lily and acknowledging the truth in their words. Before he could respond, Lily spoke up quietly. "I want to help," she said, looking at her brother. "I don't like being scared all the time. Maybe if I learn how to use my power, I won't be scared anymore." Ethan stared at her, his heart aching. He wanted to shield her from everything, but he also knew she was right. They couldn't run forever. If they were going to survive, they needed to fight back, and Lily's power might be their best chance. "All right," Ethan said finally, his voice heavy with determination. "But we do this together. No matter what happens, we stick together." Jack smiled grimly. "Welcome to the Resistance, kid." The Resistance base buzzed with activity as Jack and his team prepared for the next phase of their plan. Ethan stayed close to Lily, watching her carefully as she sat on a cot in the corner of the main chamber. She looked small and fragile amidst the chaos, her legs dangling off the edge as she swung them back and forth. Rachel knelt beside her, gently explaining how they would try to teach her to control her powers without hurting herself. "We'll start slow," Rachel said reassuringly. "Just focus on making small things happen, okay? Like turning off a flashlight or stopping a clock." Lily nodded, though her eyes still held a hint of fear. Ethan knelt down next to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're not alone in this," he told her softly. "We're all here for you." As the hours passed, tensions began to rise within the group. Supplies were running low, and several scouts had reported increased alien activity in the surrounding area. Jack paced nervously, barking orders at his people while keeping one eye on Lily. Despite his earlier words about protecting her, it was clear he saw her as their greatest asset, and possibly their only hope. That night, Ethan volunteered to take the first watch, standing guard near the tunnel entrance. The cold mountain air bit at his skin as he leaned against the rocky wall, staring out into the darkness. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something beyond the obvious danger of the aliens closing in. His suspicions were confirmed when he overheard voices coming from deeper inside the cave. Two men stood near a pile of crates, speaking in hushed tones. One of them, a wiry man named Greg, glanced around nervously before pulling out a small device, a communicator. "They know where we are," Greg muttered. "Commander Vrax promised us safe passage if we gave them the girl." Ethan's blood ran cold. Without hesitation, he slipped quietly behind a stack of supplies, listening intently. The second man, taller and broader than Greg, nodded grimly. "It's better this way," he said. "If we hand her over, maybe they'll leave the rest of us alone." Ethan clenched his fists, fury bubbling inside him. How could anyone betray their own kind like this? But there was no time to confront them. He needed to warn the others. Moving swiftly, he made his way back to the main chamber, where Rachel and Jack were reviewing maps. "We've got a problem," Ethan whispered urgently, pulling Jack aside. "Two of your men. They're planning to turn Lily over to the aliens." Jack's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked torn between anger and disbelief. Then he straightened, grabbing his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'll deal with it." Before Ethan could protest, an explosion rocked the base. The ground shook violently, sending debris raining down from the ceiling. Alarms blared as panic shouts filled the air. Through the chaos, Ethan spotted Greg and the other traitors sprinting toward the tunnel entrance, followed by a swarm of Sarthan soldiers. "Lily," Ethan yelled, rushing back to the cot where she had been sitting. She wasn't there. Panic surged through him until he saw Rachel leading Lily toward him, her face pale but determined. "We have to move," Rachel shouted above the noise. Behind them, Jack emerged from the shadows, firing his weapon at the advancing aliens. "Get her out of here," he yelled. "Go." Ethan scooped Lily into his arms and ran after Rachel, dodging falling rocks and blasts of alien energy. The tunnels twisted and turned, disorienting them as they fled deeper into the mountain. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew fainter, but Ethan knew they weren't safe yet. When they finally reached a narrow passageway blocked by rubble, Rachel stopped abruptly. "This is it," she said breathlessly. "The emergency exit should be just beyond here." Using whatever strength he had left, Ethan helped Rachel push aside chunks of rock until they uncovered a hidden door. On the other side lay a steep slope leading down to the forest below. As they descended, Ethan glanced back one last time at the crumbling base. He didn't know if Jack had survived, or even if he'd wanted him to. But one thing was certain. They were on their own again, and the aliens were still coming. Ethan, Rachel, and Lily stumbled through the forest, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they put as much distance as possible between themselves and the collapsing resistance base. The night was eerily quiet now, the distant hum of alien ships replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. But the silence didn't bring comfort. It only made Ethan's nerves tauter. He knew the aliens wouldn't give up so easily. Rachel led the way, her flashlight dimmed to avoid drawing attention. She moved quickly but carefully, scanning the ground for any signs of danger. Behind her, Ethan carried Lily, who clung to him tightly, her small body trembling with exhaustion. Her eyes were half closed, and her breathing was shallow, a stark reminder of how much strain her powers had placed on her. "We need to find shelter," Rachel whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Lily can't keep going like this." Ethan nodded, though his mind raced with worry. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just from physical fatigue, but from the weight of everything that had happened. They had trusted the resistance, only to be betrayed. Jack Dawson, the man who had seemed so confident and capable, might already be dead or worse, captured. And now, once again, it was up to Ethan to protect his sister. After what felt like hours, they came across an old missile silo hidden deep in the woods. Its metal door was slightly ajar, covered in moss and vines, as if nature had been trying to swallow it whole. Rachel pushed it open cautiously, revealing a set of stairs leading down into darkness. "It's not much, but it'll do," she said, stepping inside. "Help me clear some space." The interior of the silo was damp and cold, its walls lined with rusted pipes and crumbling concrete. In the center stood a massive control panel, long since abandoned and covered in dust. Rachel rummaged through her bag, pulling out a small lantern that cast a weak yellow light around the room. Ethan laid Lily down on a makeshift bed of blankets, brushing her hair back from her forehead. Her skin was clammy, and her eyelids fluttered weakly. "She's burning up," he murmured, panic rising in his chest. "She's pushed herself too far," Rachel said quietly, kneeling beside them. "Her body can't handle the strain of using her powers like this." "What can we do?" Ethan asked desperately. There has to be something. Rachel hesitated before answering. We let her rest. That's all we can do right now. If she tries to use her abilities again before she recovers, it could kill her. As dawn broke outside, the faint sound of alien engines echoed through the trees. Ethan clenched his fists, knowing they couldn't run anymore. They were cornered, outnumbered, and outmatched. But as he looked down at Lily, a fierce determination rose within him. He wouldn't let her die. Not here. Not like this. Wake up, Lily, he whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. We need you one more time. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Ethan, she murmured weakly. I know you're tired, he said softly, but I need you to try. Just one more time. Can you do that? Lily nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. She took a shaky breath and began to hum, the sound barely audible at first. Then it grew louder, vibrating through the air like a low electric current. The walls of the silo started to shake, and sparks flew from the ancient machinery. Outside, the alien ships shuddered violently, their systems failing en masse. Ethan shielded Lily as the ground trembled beneath them. When the humming finally stopped, Lily collapsed into his arms, unconscious. For a moment, there was silence. Then the unmistakable sound of retreating engines filled the air. They're leaving, Rachel breathed, her voice filled with awe. Ethan cradled Lily close, tears streaming down his face. You did it, he whispered. You saved us. But as he held her limp body, he couldn't shake the fear that they might have paid too high a price. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a fragile rhythm. The alien ships no longer filled the skies, their retreats signaling a temporary victory for humanity. But the cost of that victory weighed heavily on Ethan's heart. Lily had not woken up since the night in the missile silo, her small body lying still on a makeshift bed in Rachel's home. Dr. Bennett monitored her constantly, checking her vitals and adjusting the IV drip that kept her hydrated. Though she assured Ethan that Lily was stable, the lack of improvement gnawed at him. She used too much energy, Rachel explained one evening as they sat together in the dimly lit living room. Her body needs time to heal. We just have to be patient. Ethan nodded, though patience felt impossible. He spent most of his days sitting by Lily's side, holding her hand, and talking to her softly. He told her stories about their childhood, about the farm where they grew up, and about all the things they would do once she woke up. Sometimes he imagined he saw her eyelids flicker, but it was always fleeting, just his mind playing tricks on him. Outside, the world slowly began to rebuild. News spread of the mysterious EMP wave that had disabled the Xarthan fleet, giving humanity a fighting chance. Survivors emerged from hiding, banding together to reclaim what had been lost. Jack Dawson, miraculously alive after the fall of the resistance base, sent word through messengers that he was regrouping his forces. He asked Ethan to join them, promising resources and protection for Lily if they came. But Ethan refused. His place was here, with his sister. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, something changed. Ethan was dozing in the chair beside Lily's bed when he heard a faint sound, a soft groan. His eyes snapped open, and he leaned forward, gripping her hand tightly. Lily, he whispered, his voice trembling. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly. For a moment, she looked confused, her green eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. Then recognition dawned, and she smiled weakly. Ethan. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he pulled her into a careful hug. You're awake, he choked out. You're really awake. Rachel rushed in moments later, her face lighting up with relief as she examined Lily. How are you feeling? She asked gently. Tired, Lily murmured, her voice hoarse but clear. But okay. Over the next few days, Lily regained her strength little by little. Her powers seemed diminished, almost dormant, but neither Ethan nor Rachel pushed her to test them. They focused instead on helping her recover, feeding her small meals, and letting her rest whenever she needed. As spring turned to summer, life outside continued to improve. Farmers returned to their fields, towns were rebuilt, and the scars of war began to fade. Ethan often took Lily outside, watching as she played in the grass or chased butterflies. She laughed more now, her old spark returning bit by bit. One afternoon, as they sat together under a tree, Lily looked up at him with serious eyes. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked quietly. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Maybe. But we'll be ready this time. Together." Lily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I'm not scared anymore," she said. "Not as long as you're here." And for the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a future worth fighting for. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. And as long as Lily was safe, hope would never truly die.